Hello, my third graders. Welcome back to our read aloud time of the witches. So yesterday, our character and Bruno made it up to Grandmamma's room very carefully. Almost got caught by the chambermaid, but they made it in. Grandmamma has figured out what they've become, and now they're going to come up with a plan of what to do next. All right, so here's where we finished off. Remember, she had said they smelled him out, but it was only because he hadn't bathed in a couple of days. Grandmamma sucked at her cigar. Do you really mean to tell me that they're all downstairs, meaning all the witches, having tea? She asked. I'm certain of it, Grandmamma. There was another pause. I could see the old glint of excitement slowly coming back into my grandmother's eyes. And all of a sudden, she sat up very straight in her chair and said sharply, Tell me everything, right from the beginning. And please hurry. I took a deep breath and began to talk. I told about going to the ballroom and hiding behind the screen to do my mouse training. I told about the notice saying Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. I told her all about the women coming in and sitting down, and about the small woman who appeared on the stage and took off her mask. But when it came to describing what her face looked like underneath the mask, I simply couldn't even find the right words. It was horrible, Grandmamma, I said. Oh, it was so horrible. It was like something that was going rotten. Go on, my grandmother said. Don't stop. Then I told her all about the others taking off their wigs and their gloves and their shoes, and how I saw before me a sea of bald, pimply heads, and how the women's fingers had little claws, and how their feet had no toes. My grandmother had come forward now in her armchair, so that she was sitting right on the edge of it. Both her hands were cupped over the gold knob of the stick that she always used when walking, and she was staring at me with eyes as bright as two stars. Picture of Grandma. Then I told her how the Grand High Witch had shot out the fiery white hot sparks, and how they had turned one of the other witches into a puff of smoke. I've heard about that, my grandmother cried out excitedly, but I never quite believed it. You are the first non-witch ever to see it happening. It is the Grand High Witch's most famous punishment. It is known as getting fried, and all the other witches are petrified of having it done to them. I am told that the Grand High Witch makes it a rule to fry at least one witch at each annual meeting. She does it in order to keep the rest of them on their toes. But they don't have any toes, Grandmamma. I know they don't, my darling, but please go on. So then I told my grandmother about the delayed action mouse maker. And when I came to the bit about turning all of the children of England into mice, she actually leapt out of her chair shouting, I knew it! I knew they were brewing up something tremendous. We've got to stop them, I said. She turned and stared at me. You can't stop witches, she said. Just look at the power that terrible Grand High Witch has in her eyes alone. She could kill any of us at any time with those white hot sparks of hers. You saw it yourself. Even so, Grandmamma, we've still got to stop her from turning all of the children of England into mice. You haven't quite finished, she said. Tell me about Bruno. How did they get him? So I described how Bruno Jenkins had come in and how I had actually seen him with my own eyes being shrunk into a mouse. My grandmother looked at Bruno, who was guzzling away at the bowl of bananas. Does he ever stop eating? She asked. Never, I said. Can you explain something to me, Grandmamma? I'll try, she said. She reached out and lifted me off the table and put me on her lap. Very gently, she began stroking the soft fur along my back. It felt nice. What is it you want to ask me, my darling? She said. The thing I don't understand, I said, is how Bruno and I are still able to talk and think just as we did before. Oh, well, that's quite simple, my grandmother said. All they've done is shrink you and give you 4 legs and a furry coat. but they haven't been able to change you into a 100% mouse. You are still yourself in everything except your appearance. You still have your own mind and brain, your own voice, and thank goodness for that. So I'm not really an ordinary mouse at all, I said. I'm sort of a mouse person? That's quite right, she said. You are a human in mouse clothing. You are very special. We sat there in silence for a few moments while my grandmother went on stroking me very gently with one finger and puffing her cigar with the other hand. The only sound in the room was made by Bruno as he attacked the bowl of bananas. But I wasn't doing nothing as I lay there on her lap. I was thinking like mad. My brain was whizzing like it had never whizzed before. Grandmamma, I said, I may have a bit of an idea. Yes, my darling, what is it? The Grand High Witch told them her room number was 454, right? Right. Well, my room is 554. Mine, 554, is on the 5th floor. So hers, 454, would be on the 4th floor. That's correct, my grandmother said. Then don't you think it's possible that room 454 is directly underneath room 554? That's more than likely, she said. These modern hotels are all built like boxes of bricks. But what if it is? Would you please take me out onto my balcony so I can look down? I said. All the rooms in the Hotel Magnificent had small private balconies. My grandmother carried me through into my own bedroom and out onto the balcony. We both peered down to the balcony immediately below. Now, if that is her room, then I'll bet I could climb down there somehow and get in. And get caught all over again? My grandmother said. I won't allow it. At this moment, I said, all the witches are down on the Sunshine Terrace having tea with the manager. The Grand High Witch probably won't be back until 6 o'clock or just before. That's when she's going to dish out supplies of that foul formula to the ancient ones who are too old to climb trees after Gruntel's eggs. And what if you did manage to get into her room? My grandmother said. Well, what then? Then I should try to find the place where she keeps her supplies of delayed action mouse maker. And if I succeed, then I would steal one bottle of it and bring it back here. Could you carry it? I think so, I said. It's a very small bottle. I'm frightened of that stuff, my grandmother said. What would happen if you did manage to get it? Well, one bottle is enough for 500 people. That would give each and every witch down there a double dose at least. We could turn them all into mice. My grandmother jumped about an inch in the air. We were out on the balcony and there was a drop of about 1,000,000 feet below us. And I very nearly bounced out of her hand over the railing when she jumped. Grandmamma, be careful, I said. What an idea, she cried. It's fantastic. It's tremendous. You're a genius, my darling. Wouldn't it be something? I said. Wouldn't that really be something? We would get rid of every witch in England in one swoop, she cried, and the Grand High Witch in that bargain. We got to try it, I said. Listen, she said, nearly dropping me over the balcony again in her excitement. If we brought this off, it would be the greatest triumph in the whole history of witchery. There's a lot of work to do. Of course there is, she said. Just for a start, supposing you did manage to get hold of one of those bottles, how would you get it into their food? We'll work that out later, I said. Let's try to get the stuff first. How can we find out for sure if that's her room just below us? We will check it out immediately, my grandmother cried. Come along, there's not a second to waste. Carrying me in one hand, she went bustling out of the bedroom and along the corridor, banging her stick on the carpet with each step she took. She went down the stairs one flight to the 4th floor. The bedrooms on either side of the corridor had their numbers painted on the doors in gold. Here it is, my grandmother cried. Number 454. She tried the door. It was locked, of course. She looked up and down the long, empty hotel corridor. I do believe you're right, she said. This room is almost certainly directly below yours. She marched back along the corridor, counting the number of doors from the Grand High Witch's room to the staircase. There were 6. She climbed back up to the 5th floor and repeated the exercise. She is directly below you, my grandmother cried out. Her room is right below yours. She carried me back into my own bedroom and went out once again onto the balcony. That's her balcony down there. And what's more, the door from her balcony into her bedroom is wide open. How are you going to climb down? I don't know, I said. Our rooms were in the front of the hotel, and they looked down onto the beach and the sea. Immediately below my balcony, thousands of feet below, I could see a fence of spiked railings. If I fell, I'd be a goner. I've got it, my grandmother cried. With me in her hand, she rushed back into her own room and began rummaging in the chest of drawers. She came out with a ball of blue knitting wool. One end of it was attached to some needles and a half-finished sock she had been knitting for me. This is perfect, she said. I shall put you in the sock and lower you down onto the Grand High Witch's balcony. But we must hurry. Any moment now, that monster will be returning to her room. That's the end of our chapter. The next chapter is called The Mouse Burglar. Hopefully he can make it down there. We'll have to find out later. See you guys.